Good afternoon. We are here for this week's installment with Ray Zinn. This is Rich Nass. I am the Executive Vice President of Open Systems Media, and on the line we have Ray Zinn, the former CEO of Micrel. Good afternoon, Ray.
Well, thanks, Rich. I like to promote my book a little bit here, Tough Things First, because that's an important book, I think, for the industry, so I'll make sure to get that in.
You go right ahead. How would somebody find that book?
They can find it on Amazon or on Barnes & Noble. It's in all the major bookstores, book outlets, and it's my new book. I released it in November of 2015, and it's doing well, and I would invite any of those who are listening to pick the book up and read it. I think it'll serve them well if they're trying to build or improve or run a business.
I'll put in a plug for you. I actually have the book, and I read it, and I think it does wonders for somebody who's an entrepreneur, either in high-tech or not in high-tech.
Well, thanks, Rich.
My pleasure. Okay,
just want to get those few words in.
Let's talk about something that actually is part of the book, where you talk about you have to be in it for, and I'm rewording, these are my words, you have to be in it for the passion and not for the money. And I know I see so many of these startups. It's how fast can I go public? How fast can I sell my company? How fast can I get rich? And I'm guessing that you do not agree with that strategy. Is that fair?
Obviously. I mean, if you look at the statistics show, and I think this is a Harvard study that shows greater than 90% of these startups fail. And I think the reason they fail is because they're in it for the wrong reason. And so until they view their policy or their objective is to grow and build a company, they're going to continue to have this high rate of failure.
So if the failure rate is so high, why is the VC money so accessible?
Well, it's not. Actually, in semiconductors, they're not funding hardly anybody. And the reason is because the return has been so bad. I think the failure rate is so high and the cost is so great, and the gestation time, it used to be, by the way, in 3 to 5 years, the VCs could realize their return on a semiconductor company. But in today's market, 10 to 15 years is now the norm to determine if a company is even going to make it. So I think that's way beyond the runway that these VCs are willing to tolerate.
So 10 to 15 years is really what somebody should expect before they, I don't know if make their money is the right term, but that's the wait that somebody has to have before having a really profitable enterprise?
Okay, well, let's back up a little bit. So if you look at the way it was, let's say 20 years ago, you generally, if you were a semiconductor company, you had your own fab, and you were manufacturing primarily in the U.S., and it was more of a U.S.-based company, and you had good designers and good products, and so it looked like more of a sure thing. Not only that, but the companies were generally profitable within 3 to 4 years, 5 years, and today, you can start a semiconductor company with an Irish setter and a CFO. So it doesn't take much to start a semiconductor company today, and they don't have to raise much money. I mean, the foundries are all done offshore, and you don't need your own fab. You can use designers out of India or out of China, and so how do you build a company out of that? So if you're now looking at a business that requires a sufficient amount of venture capital, let's say $20 million, 20 to 50, that takes longer because now you're having to build a lot more infrastructure. You've got a bigger risk involved, hiring more designers, and it's a bigger investment, and it just takes longer now in this market because, when I started Micrel back in 1978, there were only like 100 or so companies, semiconductor companies, and today there are over 1,000. So, it doesn't take much to start a semiconductor company, and it's just not the return there for the VCs who like to see companies that need more like 20 to 30 million at least for startup.
What you're talking about is a longer conversation, and we're going to have that conversation next week. However, I just want to change the subject a little bit because you talked about the number of semiconductor companies. And there has been a lot of consolidation over the last couple of years, people merging, people being acquired. As you know, Micrel was acquired, and Microchip is also on a spending spree thereafter. Atmel now and NXP and Freescaler together. Is that good for the semiconductor industry to have this consolidation?
Well, I'm not sure it's good or bad. I think it's just a fact of life. I mean, consolidation has been underway for 50 years, and we can cite the number of companies that have been acquired in the industry on a per year basis since inception in 1957. So I don't see things any different. I think the low interest rates that we have today have allowed companies like Microchip and others to acquire companies like Micrel or Atmel because we're not GAAP finance anymore. We're non-GAAP, and that allows them then to bury some of these huge expenses for acquiring the companies, and nobody cares. So if the investors don't care whether you're GAAP or not, then consolidation can go rampant, and that's what they're doing. I mean, look at the debt structure of Microchip as they've acquired their companies over the past few years. Their debt structure is huge, but the investors don't seem to care. And so until the investors start caring about the debt that's being carried by these companies, you're gonna have that consolidation continue.
Okay, that's great. Like I said, we will continue this discussion next week because it's a very interesting one. But for this week, that was Ray Zinn. He is, as you heard, the author of a great book, Tough Things First, and I am Rich Nass with Open Systems Media. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you for inviting me again, Rich.